Well, here we are, 2025.
How you doing, Ryan?
You and I met must have been around 2010, just when I became a consultant. You were at Pfizer.
Gosh, yeah,
at the
it's
time.
been that long. Like you'll always, in my mind, be 20-something years old.
Yeah, I was 22. That's right.
Yeah.
But you've been a huge part of the past decade and a half of my life and many people's life, because since going to Merck Serono and then AbbVie and coming up on just about a decade of leadership at AbbVie,
Yes.
Japan.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of people you've impacted, so thank you for sharing some of your insights today, because this is really about you and what other leaders can learn from your experience and your journey as you turn a chapter and into a new era too. So
Thanks, Ryan. And it's been a fun ride, and it's been great working with you through these years. And I think we've a lot of things we probably can't talk about here in terms of people we've met along the way and have been able to introduce at different points and really advance some nice careers for people. It's been great. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been great connecting each other with leaders in the community,
Yeah.
and of course, many watching this are here in Tokyo and will know you or know of you. But for all the readers around the world watching this who might not be familiar with you, tell us a bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I'm James Feliciano. I've been in Japan now doing pharma for over 20 years, which is kind of hard for me to believe. I originally came to Japan when I was a junior in college for a year abroad, and that started my interest. I got a master's degree in Japanese studies from the University of Michigan, and then came back over when I was 22 years old. I stayed for almost 8 years at that time, doing different things and eventually getting into the business world. And then I transitioned back to the United States, got an MBA and from Cornell University, and that's when I entered the pharmaceutical industry, working first for Wyeth at their headquarters. And then that's when I got sent back to Japan to launch their vaccine business when my son was 1 year old. So, it's been 20 years ago almost, that I came back to Japan, started first with Pfizer and the vaccine group, went on to Merck Serono, as you know, and then AbbVie for the last 10 years.
Awesome. So you got your first sort of taste of general management as a business unit head at Wyeth, then Pfizer.
Yeah. So, very first, when I was first at Wyeth, I was more of in an operational role as a commercial director, but very kind of associate director almost. And then the first real leadership role I got was leading new products planning for Wyeth, and then becoming the vaccine business unit manager. So that was kind of the steps for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you were hired locally by Merck Serono as commercial director before becoming president of Japan there.
Yes, exactly. I had an opportunity. I completed the assignment with Wyeth and then Pfizer, and that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, because Pfizer was offering me an opportunity to go back to the United States in a U.S. marketing role, where I wanted to go into more general management, country manager role. And so I had this moment where I could go back with Pfizer in that U.S. role, or go back or stay in Japan and try and pursue the country manager. And so that was kind of my moment of truth, where I really felt to myself, I'm more interested in country management. I want to be a GM. And so I took the kind of the leap of faith, and then stayed in Japan and went down that track.
So you became a GM or a president at the age of, this must have been your early 40s?
Yeah, so more or less, early 40s,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Pretty young for in Japan terms to be a general manager,
No gray hair quite yet, right?
It's come on since.
So take us into that moment when you realized, I want to be a GM.
So I had always, when I joined Wyeth out of business school, I was working for the Asia Pacific Commercial Operations Group based in the U.S. And a lot of what we did was support the Asia Pac markets. So I would come out to Asia, I would be there for business reviews, I'd be there for brand plan reviews, launches, anything we could do to help facilitate and be a bridge between headquarters and the affiliate. We were the group in between. So I spent a lot of time working with the general managers. And I was just so fascinated by the job because you wear so many hats.
Right.
And you're overall, you're leading the organization, you're trying to drive engagement, you're trying to drive motivation and excitement in the affiliate. You have all of the finance that you're running, the HR related, it's all of the brand launches, you're going through the portfolio, you're making decisions, and the GM is very empowered in that kind of a model. You see some companies that have gone to almost like a BU model where the BU head reports in centrally. And that's a different kind of, I think, organizational structure. But in my case, I was always working where there was an actual GM who was who's running the general manager of the affiliate. And that for me, I thought, that's just such a great job. I mean, how can you ever get bored in a job like that? And sure enough, the more I learned about it, the more I looked into it, I said, yeah, I think this is the place where I can thrive, because especially in the market like in Japan, you become the bridge between headquarters and the affiliate, and you're the person that's kind of linking the two and trying to drive corporate strategy into local execution and to customize it, but to make it understandable for everybody. So it's there's a science to it and there's an art to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, as you say, it's a very multifaceted skill set, from sales and marketing to operations, finance, and in the pharmaceutical context, regulatory, market access policies as well. So walk us through what parts of that came really naturally to you, and where were your growing pains where you realized, I need to get some of the right people around me here?
For sure. I mean, as a GM, the different verticals within the organization, the science is incredibly tricky, and understanding the regulatory pathways in Japan and the market access and pricing, all of these things are incredibly complicated and interconnected, and you really need to know. Then the rules are changing, and they're somewhat fluid in terms of the interpretation of some rules. And then you have headquarters wanting to know, okay, what's the probability of success on this? Because they have to put it into their NPV model, for example. So that's where really the expertise on the science side, in R&D, regulatory, market access, I think that was always something. I came more from the commercial sales marketing side of things. My MBA is in strategic marketing, for example. So that's where where my strength comes in terms of the fundamentals around selling and marketing. The science side was always something I had to always keep working on and to become better at. And when you're in a therapeutic area long enough, you start to learn it and understand it. But for example, when I got to AbbVie, we had Humira, one product, 12 indications. So that's 12 different diseases that you have to really learn and understand. It's a lot like drinking out of a fire hose in the beginning.
Right. And so for someone who is looking to be a GM someday, but they're not an expert in finance or the regulatory side of the business or whatever, what would be your advice to them to start kind of building those muscles today, even before they're a GM?
I mean, it's interesting. If you look at the general managers in Japan right now, if we were to kind of map out the different GMs for the different big companies, you have some that have an R&D background, you have some that have a finance background, you have some that are very commercial minded or marketing type backgrounds. So I don't think there's any one path to get to that to become a GM. I think any path you start on, you're going to have areas where they're not your strength. And it's about developing a good plan for yourself to get those, to build on those different skill sets. I think that if you're truly, genuinely interested in being a general manager, a country manager, at the end of the day, having fundamental sales and marketing, frontline business experience, like leading a sales team, you've got to have that, because at the end of the day, what a general manager is most in charge of is delivering a P&L,
Right.
and delivering a sales line, a top line and a bottom line. So you have to be able to have a very strong experience in terms of sales and marketing, 100%. The other things in terms of the understanding of the science and regulatory and market access, you can learn that along the way. But I think it would be relatively difficult for someone from R&D to not ever touch sales and marketing and then become a GM, for example.
Really being in tune with the front line of the business, and what customers want and why, and those day-to-day struggles they go through.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yes. And then, additionally, I think a very key piece of being a general manager is how you drive engagement of your organization. And, how are you setting a vision, and how are you communicating that to the organization, and how are you communicating? And so having some sort of a strong executive presence is also very important.
And that's something that you've done extremely well, because you've seen employee engagement rates of over 90% in the organization. And I know one thing you've done is sitting down with employees, such as after they join the company, but not just limited to that moment, to really map out their career and bring color to that.
Yes.
Walk me through that a little bit more.
Yeah. So when I joined AbbVie, especially, we were entering a period of huge growth that was coming. And when I joined, we were about 650 people, and now we're getting close to 2,000 people.
Wow.
So the organization grew exponentially over the course of those 10 years. Lots of new product launches, lots of new people coming in. Every month we would have 30 to 40 new employees joining. And one of the things that was important just to me as a leader, but I also thought it was really critical for the organization, is for us to have a North Star about where we were going and what direction we were working on, where were we putting our efforts. So for the first 5 years, we created what we called, very simply, the 5-year plan. Right. It was so our 5-year plan was where we wanted to be in those 5 years, and our goal was to be a top 20 pharma company by, at that time, 2020, which we were able to do actually 2 years ahead of time. But we had different elements in terms of how we wanted to grow our business and how we wanted to engage employees, and we had 3 elements for each one, and we just always talked about that, and we could pretty much anything we were doing in the company could somehow relate to one of those 6 elements in the 5-year plan. So we just tried to, it was our 5-year plan, 5-year focus. We wanted to really, where were we focusing our energy during that time? So the 5-year focus was our 5-year plan.
Really interesting. So let's take a step back for a moment, because if my memory serves me correctly, you had just about a year or 2 of GM experience before joining AbbVie.
Correct.
So there must have been some discussion among those interviewers. Does this guy have enough experience? How did you sell yourself for that?
Yeah, it was. That's a good question. I think a big part of any role when you're entering something like that is what's your rapport with the person you're going to be reporting to.
Right.
And so I was very open and honest about my strengths were I had an understanding of Japan. I had done a number of launches. I was a seasoned executor in Japan, having been a business unit director, a business unit manager, a business unit director, a commercial director with about 18 months of GM experience. That wasn't to say that this wasn't going to be a step up for me. It wasn't going to be a stretch assignment, but I wanted to really understand what their goals were. Because this was, at that time, AbbVie was a very new company. They had just split from Abbott. So there wasn't a lot of track record about AbbVie itself as a company.
Right.
So I really looked to understand first what they were looking for. I was actually interviewing them as much as they were interviewing me, to be honest. Because I honestly, when I was reluctant to leave so quickly from my previous job because it had only been about 18 months. Right. So I really needed to be personally convinced in my heart that this was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And just in talking during the interview stages and having different conversations, I just felt like, wow, they really have a plan here, and they're really going to put energy into Japan, and that this is an opportunity to really build something. And having that shared excitement with the leadership team, and I could really feel from day one that I was going to be empowered to drive this business for them. And that was a key for me, being empowered and knowing that, I was going to have a strong support system, but there was a lot that they felt that I could bring to the table to push things forward.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like understanding what they needed was half the battle.
Yeah.
It wasn't a one-way interview. It was you as an individual, a professional, understanding them and listening to the core of what they needed, which then enabled you to look at your inventory or your track record, your confidence inventory, and then be able to position that track record in a way that was going to benefit them to achieve that vision.
I think so. I think you articulated it very well. A lot of times we'll go into interviews and we're just trying to sell ourselves. And then at the end of the interview, maybe you have your one or two questions. In that interview process, it was about 50-50 interview. I was interviewing them just because they were just such a new entity at the time. And I really just wanted to understand, just like the street at the time was like, what's going to happen after Humira? I mean, right now you're just a Humira company. What's next? And understanding that strategy that they had, and to hear it, and when talking to different people in the interview process, and to hear it articulated very similarly across with the different executives at the time, I knew that this was a very focused team with a real vision for what they wanted AbbVie to be. Which I found very exciting, and something that I felt it was the perfect moment of my road and their road kind of merging together and creating a good synergy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fast forward to now, you've not just had to sell yourself to get the role, but perform in the role for almost a decade, developing many leaders along the way. So, selling yourself like a CEO doesn't just apply to the interview setting, but also painting a picture of success and bringing people along for that ride. So for future fit leaders, future leaders who are, who are aspiring to become a general manager, and times are changing, right? We're living in an unprecedented world of volatility. What would you say and advise to leaders of tomorrow how to sell themselves within the organization to take people along for a ride, despite them having a direct report line or not with those people?
I think it's a good question. I think it's important for anyone who is aspiring and wants to really proactively manage their career is networking. You have to network within your organization as much as you can, and to spend time talking to people, telling them what you're interested in, raising your hands for things, trying to get involved. As I went through my career, I was always very proactive in managing upwards with my bosses about, this is where I want to go. How can I get there? What are the experiences that I need? Can you help me get there? And give me the opportunities to push myself and to show you what I can do. And I think what I found as well as a leader personally, it's a lot easier when an employee or a team member is very clear about the vision of where they want to go, because then we can work backwards with them to what are the steps they need to get there. Because, I'm a big believer in having, a 3 or a 5 year plan for yourself of where you want to go. And then like kind of a 10-year vision of where you see yourself in 10 years. But it doesn't have to be as concrete. But from 5 years, you should have an idea of where you want to be. That's more or less 2 or 3 jobs. So you need to be very strategic in how you play that. And you don't want to exit a role too early. You don't want to stay in a role too long. You want to be at the just right, get the right resume experiences, get the right proof points that then get you to that next job. And sometimes it could be, what I really enjoy with some talents that I've worked with is kind of mapping out and saying, okay, look, you're an R&D person. You've got a great track record here. Why don't we, put you over here as a therapeutic area MSL lead for 2 years? Very different job, but you can still leverage your science. You can get some customer-facing experience, and then that gives you more opportunities 2 years from now to maybe even go further down a commercial road or go back into R&D. But can we create opportunities that have exponentially more opportunities the next time?
Yeah.
You never want to see one of your employees going down a dead end.
Yeah.
Right? So like mapping out and having a plan like that and working proactively to create that path for yourself with your leaders is super important.
Awesome. Charting your path.
Yes.
Charting your path and making sure that the next step is going to bring exponentially more opportunities down the road. So, I'm sure a lot of people put their hand up and want to be a GM in the long term, but not everyone perhaps has what it takes, or perhaps it's just not the right organization. So I'm curious what you look for in leaders who are fit to be a GM in the future. What are those qualities that make someone a potential CEO?
So the first thing I'm going to look at is how do they run their team? And the first proof point is going to be as a business unit manager or a business unit director. And I'm going to look at, first of all, how are they presenting and delegating and leading in brand reviews, offsite meetings, sales meetings, things like that. I'm looking at presence. I'm looking at, is this leader, are they articulating a vision? How are they empowering their teams? How is that person interacting with their national sales manager? How are they interacting with their area managers, for example? I'm watching all of these things, because when you're a general manager, basically everything you do is being watched. You can be in the snack room, in the lounge, reading emails, having a cup of coffee, and if you make the wrong face or show some sort of disconcerting look, people are like, oh, Chad, something's wrong with you. Someone's always watching you, right? So how is that person, how are they leading? How are they interacting with their teams? And then how are they explaining the task at hand? How are they empowering their teams? How are they motivating these teams? I'm watching all of these things, as well as how are they managing their P&L? How are they managing their expense line? How are they handling compliance infractions, or how are they driving a compliance mindset? All of these things. I'm watching it very holistically, and looking at that total leader, and that's where I kind of create my overall impression. I'm not just looking for the most charismatic leader. I also believe still water can run very deep, and there's something to be said for that as well. So it doesn't have to be the best looking, most sharply dressed, person who can, sell ice to an Eskimo. That's great. I mean, that's also, there's a place for people like that, and a lot of them are great leaders. But I also want to see other elements of leadership, especially how they're being followed by their team.
And of course, those numbers that you watch, you then have to tell a story to headquarters.
Absolutely.
To help them understand what's going on in Japan. And this country is often described as a black box, but that sounds like a really indispensable skill, telling stories through numbers. What does that mean to you? And perhaps you could think of an example to illustrate the power of storytelling through numbers.
So look, I think, especially when you're trying to present your country and your business, you have to have an aligned story with the whole organization, and that's the best way that you're gonna be able to convey it to headquarters so they can understand what you're trying to do. We have situations where, for example, in certain therapeutic areas, you'll see maybe the AbbVie market share was not as high as in other markets, but one of the reasons for that is, for example, there's a major Japanese player in that therapeutic area in Japan that's not as high a market share in other countries. So, you have to, put things into context.
Right.
And, you're not necessarily making excuses, but you have to at least have people understand the bigger picture of what you're trying to do. And, total current market share might not tell the whole story. There might be a stronger proof point in terms of new patient starts over the last 6 months, where your market share is actually quite higher. But when you look at total patients, it's not as high yet. So you have to really be able to understand the numbers and what they mean, and then craft that into a story of A, where you were, B, where you are, and C, where you're going. And then what are you going to do to impact the various elements that drive change, for that. So giving a specific is a little challenging because of proprietary information and what have you. But I think that's always what I try to work with my team, especially with my finance team, because I think your finance partner is a critical part of any general manager's team. I always thought that my finance director was my left hand and my HR director was my right hand, honestly. And just working with finance to, going deeper than just the sales and expense lines, but what's happening and how, and there are lots of different tides moving, undercurrents in any market, and you really need to understand what's moving, how can you impact it, and where do you want to place your effort.
Yeah.
And there's never a right answer. You never really know. And that's where having a good relationship with headquarters to get their expertise, because they know other markets. They know all of the data that's available. And there's, you can start shaping things to help move the market and to give more proof points for the science. So, I mean, it's definitely a give and take, and it's a dialogue with headquarters. And so you have to be able to do that dance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for viewers of or readers of the book, Sell Yourself Like a CEO, one of the goals of this book is to bust some of the myths around selling yourself. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions about selling yourself, and how does the book tackle those?
I think one is you don't need to know it all, and I think that to be being humble in your leadership is really important, and to empower the people around you. Your job as a true leader, as a CEO, is to bring out the best of all the subject matter experts around you. Your management team is what's critical, and how well is your management team leading that organization? It's not a dictatorship. You don't run everything, and you can't know everything. So how do you fully, how do you maximize the strengths of the subject matter experts around you, and make sure that everyone's aligned and pointing in the same direction and having that vision? That's really the key. You can't know everything, and I think you see a lot of younger, less experienced managers. They burn out very quickly because they're trying to do everything, and they don't let go, and they don't empower, and that's a recipe for disaster in my experience.
Awesome. What did you like the most about Sell Yourself Like a CEO?
For me, I think it's not just a book that you read. It's a book that you read and then you reflect, and that you actually put pen to paper and think about. And explore, because I think for me, self-awareness is so critical for any leader. It's one thing to get input and to just read, but are you truly then turning that into output that's tangible? And so that element of your book, where you have the opportunity to actually spend time reflecting and having output after getting the input, is the key. That's what makes it useful. We were talking about values, for example, and how does your leadership reflect your values? Well, I think it goes actually before that. You need to ask yourself, what are your values?
Yeah.
It's a very difficult question. Just to have in a cold interview, to have someone say, well, what are your values? As relates to what? As relates to being a general manager, or a country manager. That's not a simple question. You need to spend you need to spend an immense amount of time really reflecting on what your core leadership values are. It's not an easy question to answer. And I think that for the people who are doing and reading your book, if they don't spend the time doing those exercises, that's where the benefit's really going to come. The input is great, the thought-provoking, but how do you take thought-provoking content and then make it into something that you can use and execute on? That's where your book has that, and that's the key, I think.
Thank you. And of course, you make a habit of carving out time for this sort of intentional self-reflection. So looking back on the past decade or so, or I mean your whole career for that matter, what's an aha moment that's kind of been a light bulb moment for you that you wish you would have known earlier? Not necessarily from the book, just an aha moment.
Just in general?
Yeah.
In general, aha moment.
As a leader.
Oh, gosh. A lot. I think the biggest one that really, I think, propelled me as a leader to be successful is when you're dealing with a very, kind of a crisis situation, when things are stressful, the point that everyone's always watching you. When you're the general manager, you really are kind of like the heartbeat of the company in many ways, and people look to you. And I remember being in a situation where someone, they kind of brought me some surprising news, and I kind of, I let it show that I was concerned about this, and I could just sense the tone in the room when people saw I don't want to say fear, but the lack of confidence about the situation and how it was going to turn out. I could feel it. And I ended up reflecting on it later. I was like, you really do need a poker face in this job. You need to, whatever comes your way at any time, and you never really know when anything's going to happen. What's going to happen, what it's going to be. But you just, as the leader, you have to be calm, cool, and collected, and just you have to be the voice of reason and say, okay, what do we know? What don't we know? And what do we need to know? Mm-hmm. And just to be that rock for people around you, and to delegate, and to keep people centered and focused. Mm-hmm. As a leader, you are not afforded the luxury of showing doubt. Right. You have to just always, you have to be reaffirming in any situation. And that's something that I learned, and I think as I got older, I understood more. But it was the first year that I had being a GM. And I've always said, like, you kind of make it through your first year as a GM, by the grace of God, really, because you just don't have it. You have no radar. You don't know anything. You're just trying to get through. But as my stripes, as I earn my stripes, if you will, I think pretty much anything could happen now, and I would keep that poker face. Yeah. But in the beginning, it was hard. Yeah.
So James, being a headhunter behind the scenes, the pay package for a CEO, a GM, is exponentially higher than even the next tiers down. And for folks out there who don't know how much a general manager, a CEO makes, could be anywhere between $300,000 a year and into the millions. Very wide range. So curious to hear, what are some of those moments where you really step up to the plate, and what are those moments that you really pay the big bucks for?
So yeah, it's a good question, and I think there are two elements to being a general manager. One is smoothly running the day-to-day organization in a efficient way, that the machine is always moving calmly and smoothly. I think that being a GM, I'd like to think of things in metaphors, and I feel like in one way I'm like a forest ranger up and I'm just around looking for smoke. And if I see smoke, I go check it out and make sure it's not turning into a fire, because you're just trying to tamp out fires as quickly as possible. But then on the flip side of that, you have some very acute moments where decisions need to be made quickly. Information needs to be collected quickly and understood and shared with headquarters quickly to make decisions that have multi-million-dollar swings to it. And you need to be able to represent that to headquarters in a very confident, very efficient way. For senior executives who are running billion-dollar companies to, within an hour, to be able to understand the situation and to make a decision, and that will then affect your affiliate. So that doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen with some frequency, where you are put in front of that audience, and you have to own the moment. You have to represent. In the case of being a general manager in Japan, you're one of the major markets, ex-US. So you have to very strongly represent what the situation is and what the outcomes could be to senior management, so they can endorse a certain decision. That's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of the high pressure leadership. And then you have other times where there's a lot of uncertainty, but a decision needs to be made. And it could be a regulatory related or pricing negotiation that's going on. And there's a lot of things that aren't so clear in those moments, but you have to put forward the best recommendation to headquarters for the next step to take. And there's some risk associated with that. And that's where, again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier: how strong is the team underneath you? And how well can you gather that information, make it into a clear, concise soundbite that everyone can understand. And what's even more challenging now in today's day and age, where you have different verticals, everyone's reporting in a matrix. So the different people on your team are also reporting to their hierarchies, and you want to make sure that the message is very clear and cogent across the organization, because you don't want some kind of strange telephone game happening where what you've said is just getting misinterpreted, and it gets to the top and it's 4 different things. So message control and all of that. It's personally, I love those moments. It's pretty stressful, but getting the team together, and I'm very, people joke and they call me the whiteboard guy, because I'm always writing. I don't believe in just talking. I believe in we write it down, and word for word we do all the wordsmithing, and okay, are we in agreement that this is our statement? And then I'm very clear. No one says anything but this, and so that we're clearly aligned. Like getting that alignment across different departments, and then getting that alignment with headquarters, and then bringing it back and executing it. That's high pressure. You can't miss, and that's what really drives as a CEO. That's a moment. That's a real moment.
Right.
Pretty intense.
It sounds like it's an accumulation of lots of constant kind of tweaks in what you're doing, so it has the right impact and not the negative impact. Because just like the example of you being in the cafeteria in the company, and the way you raise an eyebrow in the wrong way can send an impact, negative or positive, that can then affect a 2,000 person organization.
100%. It's so true. And then the follow up on execution, and then how do you communicate that? Because your organization is aware of what's happening around it. So, and it's important to always be transparent with the organization on what's happening and how you share that information. And I think when the organization is aware and they feel like, oh wow, we're part of this, and we have a very transparent management team that's really talking to us about what's going on, that drives engagement. Because at the end of the day, especially when you have an 800 person sales force, you really need them to be motivated and believing in this company, and because they're the ones who are representing you in the front lines with those doctors.
So for folks watching this who feel an ambition inside of them that they want to make more money, but that motivation may be rooted in wanting to put their kids into international school or wanting to look after their parents or whatever the reason might be. But what's one thing that you think they could put into practice today, anyone who's not even a CEO yet, to start working those muscles of self-awareness and handling crises? Perhaps one is just taking a moment to go through their North Star so that they have a clear message to share with people at the bar or at a company event or to their son, so that they're reinforcing their own direction, and therefore it's having the right impact on the people around them.
I agree. I think that you need to be able to articulate your story, and you need to be able to articulate who you are and where you want to go. And if you can do that in a very concise way, in a very powerful way, with confidence, you'll find that people around you will come and empower you towards that. It's if you don't know where you want to go, no one can help you.
Yeah.
Then you're looking for some guru who's going to show you the way. But if you know where you want to go and you know what you want to do, then you find there are more people around you who are there to help you on that road.
Yeah.
So being able to articulate that and understanding. So I think that's one of the keys of your book, actually, is that self-awareness is the key. You have to first really understand yourself and what are your goals, what are your values, what do you want to do, where are you now versus where do you want to be, and then start to map that out.
And of course, you've had a lot of highs as well with that exponentially, sustained exponential growth over almost over a decade. How do you stay humble through those moments?
I mean, for me, it's always a team win. It's always something that we do together, and it's never my win. It's the teams that are driving it. They're the ones who deserve the recognition. They're the ones who deserve the praise. They're the ones who are doing the heavy lifting. Always remember that. It's always the teams. As a leader, my job is to try and make life as easy as I can for them to execute and to be successful. So I'm just trying to clear the way as much as I can. But they're the ones who score the goal. They're the ones who really do the heavy lifting. It's always about your team. It's never about you, is my mindset.
And so now as the team that you've built is carrying that vision forward, what's next for you?
Yeah. It's a kind of a big turning point in my life. In many, many ways, my son is graduating from college, and I always knew this moment was coming. It has always been part of my 5 or 10 year plan that around this point I would be pivoting, and I've decided to stay in Japan, and that I want to continue to add value to bringing innovation to Japanese patients. And so I'll be starting my own company where I'll be focusing on pharmaceutical consulting, executive coaching, and just connecting people together, for the greater good of society. I have use my network. I think I can add value there. And there's a lot of companies that are very interested in Japan. There's a lot of Japanese companies that are looking to export out. There's a real opportunity for innovation to thrive here in Japan. And I want to be a part of that in some exciting way. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, and just what can I do to continue to serve Japanese patients in Japan? That's my next mission.
Awesome. Well, thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nice. I think that the work you're doing with selling yourself like a CEO is really good. It's very important. And I think one of the things that I've seen is Japanese talent are often getting overlooked by other global talent when they're trying to get to headquarters and things like that. And I think a lot of the fundamental points that you're raising in your book are very coachable points that people can use to do some self-awareness, some self-reflection, and then take that to make themselves better. I mean, if you learn 1 or 2 things from your book, then that is a very positive opportunity for growth as a leader. So I just really encourage the Japanese talents in Japan. I think it's a great opportunity to get some nuggets of wisdom that they can carry forward, because I really want to see Japan become a global exporter of talent. That's one of my big goals. And I think your book really contributes in that direction.
Fantastic. Well, if folks out there are interested in getting one-on-one executive coaching, can they reach out to you as well?
Sure. I'll be updating my LinkedIn with the new information very soon.
Okay.
Yes, great.
Well, thank you, James.
Thank you.
Otsukare-sama on
Absolutely.
a great career, and looking forward to partnering with you in various ways.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, James.